Okay, so this last video we're going to focus on some other biting arthropods, particularly biting flies, noticeably the mosquitoes. And if you're traveling in international settings, this is even more of a concern than here in the United States. But some of the diseases that are transmitted by mosquitoes could include West Nile virus. And West Nile virus deaths have slowed down a little bit, but were significantly high not all that long ago.
Growing concerns over the West Nile virus across so many states now. And we learned late today that the spraying in Dallas has been halted for tonight because of the weather. And just as we learn of this new delay, we're getting a clearer picture tonight of just how concerned federal authorities are. The Centers for Disease Control now reporting 26 deaths so far. Nearly 700 confirmed cases. That's more than 3 times the normal number at this point in the year. I wanted to widen out here tonight and show you just how widespread this is now coast to coast. And we're going to light up the states in red. The red states are the ones affected, and that number is now up to 43 states reporting cases of the virus. But as I mentioned there at the top, at ground zero tonight in Dallas, they're scaling back, at least for now. 10 people have died there, but the bad weather is getting in the way again. So we lead off tonight here with meteorologist Ginger Z now.
Breaking in, spraying down. Tonight, our nation is in assault mode. The mission? Eliminate mosquitoes that could carry the West Nile virus. In Carrollton, Texas, they're busting into abandoned pools and cleaning them out. That way, mosquitoes can't breed in that stagnant water.
We'll come back and put a larvicide donut in there, and that'll last about 30 days.
In New Mexico, North Carolina, and Illinois, it's a spray that they hope will protect.
I went to bed that night, and next morning I woke up, I was blind.
That's Hal Dalton, Oklahoma's first confirmed human case this year. He is one of the nation's almost 700 infected with the virus. With at least 26 people dead, this is the worst outbreak of the West Nile virus this early in the season ever. Ground zero this year, Dallas, Texas.
There's no question that there's something different going on in Texas this year, but we would not call this a major epidemic.
So no need to panic, says West Nile virus expert Dr. Ian Lipkin, but it's no time for complacency either.
This is enough for mosquitoes to develop.
It doesn't take much. Even with volume like this is sufficient to allow mosquitoes to breed.
In Dallas, the aerial attack with pesticides was again grounded today because of rain and storms. Interestingly enough, this year's drought could be playing a factor in the increase of West Nile virus cases.
Now, one of the things that happens in drought years is that people tend to collect water. So when this occurs, you have perfect breeding grounds for mosquitoes.
Ginger Z with us here on the desk tonight, and you were telling me these thunderstorms rolling through Dallas this evening clear out by tomorrow?
They do. They start to dry out, and really Monday and Tuesday will be much better spraying days for the folks there in Dallas.
And you heard from authorities the best way to help protect yourself.
Yeah, bug spray, of course, but then dusk and dawn is when those critters come out. So remember, that's the time to avoid going outdoors.
All right, see you first thing in the morning on GMA. Ginger, thank you.
Okay, so they say that if you think that you're too small to make a difference in the world, try spending a night with a mosquito. So that was a Dalai Lama quote. And, you know, the mosquitoes themselves as a group, they've killed more people together than probably all the wars combined ever. Not probably, that's definitely. Even during some of the wars, mosquitoes kill more people than combat alone. COVID-19, the 1918 flu, together, they still have they're not even close to how many people these things have killed through the different diseases that they transmit. Thankfully, in the United States, we've largely eradicated malaria from the U.S., but in developing regions around the world, if you travel to some areas, you can get malaria. So some folks may know George Clooney and his father Nick. You know, they do a lot of work with fair elections and parts of the world where the elections are even more contentious than they would be here in the United States, where the access to vote is not it's worse than what it may look like here in the U.S. So in some regions where they go, malaria exists, and you have to take a pill every day to prevent getting malaria. And if you don't do that and you get bit by a mosquito carrying it, you can have malaria. So George Clooney's dealt with malaria because of it. Yellow fever, something that can be vaccinated against, but very serious, spread from person to person by mosquitoes. Dengue, another one. There are a variety of other ones. St. Louis encephalitis, Western equine encephalitis, Eastern equine encephalitis, and then Zika is a new one. So just some equine encephalitis is not too common in people. Lacrosse encephalitis is spread by a treehole mosquito, or maybe it's just there's some different mosquitoes that transmit these. St. Louis encephalitis is also one that we worry about. So we don't want to get bit by mosquitoes. West Nile virus is relatively new. We first saw some birds that were dropping from the sky in 1999, and there were a few human cases in New York. And by 2000, it was dead birds in a few eastern seaboard states, and then just a few human cases in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. But over the 2000s, this thing just started spreading all over the United States. By 2003, you have almost 2,000 cases in Nebraska. By 2012, when that last YouTube video was showed, it was pretty much everywhere. Especially does real well and has remained endemic in Texas, Louisiana, and parts of California. The mosquitoes are just growing and living in the storm drains, storm sewers, abandoned pools, and the mosquitoes reproduce, and they're biting birds that are carrying this virus, and then occasionally those birds bite people and transmit the virus to people. And the elderly and immunocompromised have succumbed to it. So even in Kentucky, we occasionally would get some cases of this. It's everywhere. And it's still around. It still happens. And if you're elderly, this can be a real concerning thing. So if you're an old guy out there fishing for your outdoor experience, you want to be taking caution so you don't get bit by mosquitoes. And it's not just West Nile virus that we have to worry about. Another one that is of great concern that came on the scene, especially in the southern United States, is Zika virus. And there's a condition called microcephaly that when Zika showed up particularly in South America, microcephaly, a birth defect where the baby's head is smaller than expected, similar to babies of the same sex and age. So some of the pregnant mothers, particularly in Brazil, who got bit by Zika-carrying mosquitoes, ended up with having babies that have microcephaly. And there are all kinds of other problems other than just having a small head that relate to the development and the life of those babies that are born with these small heads. And Zika was linked to this. Thankfully for people in the U.S., unfortunately, though, because when it doesn't affect the U.S., sometimes there's not as much research and development done. But Zika, it really devastated parts of Brazil, and parts of the southern United States still run the risk of Zika potentially moving into our region of the world. So Category 1 regions affected by Zika include Florida and Texas. And Zika is just one example of several other ones. There's an entire discipline called One Health, and One Health focuses on how we as people have to live here on the planet with animals, with the insects. We have to deal with the climate. They have to deal with us. All these things. So we do a lot of work, our faculty here at EKU, on working, especially in tropical regions of the world, on One Health. One Health is so intertwined with climate and global climate change and where people are living. And we have to be very mindful of One Health because it's not just going to be Zika today. I'm talking about Zika and mosquitoes and West Nile virus. So West Nile virus is new. Zika is new. COVID-19, it's a disease that bounced from animals into people. We don't know how many intermediate hosts from the time it left bats and got to people, but at some point it was jumping through animals, or at least one animal, into people. And there will be new mosquito-related viruses that will affect people. And mosquitoes used to get knocked back by cold weather. As it gets warmer and the winters don't have as long of a freeze period, it's easier for these things that are tropical to move into North America. So what do we got to do? Well, there's things that we can do to protect ourselves from biting ticks, biting mosquitoes. We should avoid areas where ticks are elevated, or elevated levels of Lyme disease, or when we know that there are, we should wear light colors, light long sleeve shirts and pants, so that we can find these dark colored fleas and dark colored ticks and dark colored flies on us, so we can remove them. We should check for ticks on our body. We should try to avoid being out in the dusk hours when the mosquitoes are most active. We shouldn't tolerate their habitat being left around. You know, it's one thing to have wetlands where you have salamanders and fish and things like that that could potentially eat mosquito larvae. It's another thing to just have stacks of old tires where the salamanders and frogs can't grow and live, but the mosquitoes can get there with no predator. Old tires and buckets of water that are just left upright for water to accumulate are particularly problematic, so we should try to eliminate these, and some communities prohibit them. If they're around campsites where people are going to be staying, or around fishing spots for people, get rid of them. And then we should use sprays and repellents to keep these things from biting us. In some parts of East Africa, some of these sprays are no longer really repelling them. The mosquitoes are used to it. But we can use DEET, which is the #1 chemical spray. And there's different concentrations that the higher the DEET concentration, the longer it'll stay on the person or on the clothing. They make higher DEET concentrations that would irritate your skin that are more appropriate for clothing or apparel. You can mix things. Eucalyptus oil, it's a bio-based product. Lemongrass is another one, lemongrass oil. Those things, all of them together, kind of annoy or aggravate mosquitoes. And one of our speakers at that One Health conference, Grayson Brown, and he worked a lot with these biological controls. There's a company in Lexington, Kentucky called Mosquito Mate. Mosquito Mate has patented strains they have patented strains. If I can get this thing to come up. So Mosquito Mate has patented strains of mosquitoes that are environmentally friendly, innovative mosquito control, where they essentially have super males that shoot blanks. So they impregnate female mosquitoes, and then the female mosquitoes aren't able to have offspring because they think that they've had they think that they've got babies on the way. So there are some innovative ways that we can try to continue to learn how to fend these things off. So let's do a quick review. Should be able to name at least one mosquito-borne disease impacting U.S. citizens, or a couple mosquito-borne diseases of recent concern in the U.S. West Nile virus and Zika are just a couple of them. Who's most likely to die from a mosquito-borne virus in the U.S.? So the elderly and the immunocompromised. All right, was West Nile virus a big problem during the United States Civil War or U.S. Revolutionary War? So mosquitoes were, certainly. Maybe malaria and yellow fever. But what about West Nile virus? Was it? Hopefully you answered no, because when did West Nile virus show up? Wasn't until 1999. How might we prevent mosquitoes from living near our campsite? What steps can we take? So let's remove any areas where standing water may exist. Throw dirt in to fill in little puddles, and remove any old tires, and remove trash where water might accumulate in plastic containers or old pop cans. What type of clothing could we wear to reduce tick and mosquito-borne disease? Long sleeve, light colors. What two chemicals are the most common chemicals for applying to the body for preventing mosquito and tick bites? So the best answers there would be DEET and then eucalyptus oil. Another one that you might mention is lemongrass oil. So that's all for this review, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. This finishes up the Great Outdoors section.